You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 262 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. My guest today is Holly Moscrop, who describes herself on her blog, One Girl and Her Cows, as a 20-something Yorkshire lass, cow enthusiast, home baker, and lover of all things four-legged. Holly grew up on her family's farm in Yorkshire, and when she was 16, was diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis, ME, also known as CFS, as well as, I'm going to get Holly to say this rather than me, it's PoTS for short. Holly, what can you say the full thing?
Yeah, it's postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. It's
There we
easier
are.
just to say POTS.
I'm glad you said that. Thank you. Which had an acute impact on her. Always knowing that she has wanted a life in agriculture, however, she's been determined to find her place in the industry. And today we're going to find out more about that. Holly, welcome to Meet the Farmers. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me.
Where shall we start? Let's start with the farm. So tell us a little bit about the farm up in Yorkshire and so what you've got going on.
Yeah, so we're kind of I'd say small, but like small for two families to be on. Mixed farm, arable and beef. We have a beef suckler herd and some arable land. We come to about 225 acres overall, a mixture of grazing licenses, rentals, and owned bits. So we're also a contracting business because it's a family farm with my dad and my uncle. And now it's also my uncle's son and me doing admin. And it started off with my granny and my granddad. So it's like built from there. So in order to keep more than one family, we've had to branch. Well, we started contracting way back when it was just my granddad. He was actually a contractor first. So that's the majority of our work now.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say it's the constant challenge of family farms is how you manage to get even two generations sort of going at the same time. So clearly you are making it work.
Yeah, exactly. It's not big enough to keep one family, let alone two. And it was three. So we actually started off with just the contracting. My granddad wasn't a farmer. He was a farmhand working on other farms and he started contracting. And then he wanted a base for his machines. So we started renting here and we just never left.
What was it like to grow up on the farm?
It was amazing. Like to have all that space, to have a front row seat to animals giving birth. I mean, we're now just beef and arable, but back when I was growing up, we also had pigs and sheep.
Oh, right.
So we had only a little amount of each, just a bit of everything basically. But soon, well, the sheep was kind of mine and my grandmother's kind of thing. And after them escaping one too many times, they got put in a trailer and sent to market. So that was the end of sheep.
Yeah, you were not alone with that thought of sheep. I know there's a lot of people out there who love them, and a lot of people out there who don't like them quite so much.
I personally love them. I would have them back in a heartbeat. I just have no one voting alongside me for that.
Yeah, you're on your own.
Yeah.
But you do you do have a love of cows. And I mean, can you sort of remember sort of how that was sort of developing?
We've had cows right from when I was born. We've had a suckler herd. And I remember I was actually terrified of cows when I was younger.
All right.
Their love for them was not there because I think the suckler herd started by buying in everyone's culls and dairy culls and multi-suckling onto them. That's how it began. And then as we kind of grew, we started breeding our own cows from them by keeping the cows off the bull we just got rid of. And the bull we just got rid of was mostly Limousins. So we ended up with a herd of cows when I was a child that didn't really want you near their calves.
So it sounds like you had a pretty amazing childhood. take us though to when so you were 16, were you, when you were diagnosed with ME?
Yeah, so when I was just kind of a few months from turning 16, I started to get really poorly all the time, one like virus after another, and just never picked up. And just thought it's just taking some time, and I'll just keep pushing through and trying to carry on going to school and carry on. I did a lot of horse riding, so tried to carry on riding, and then it just completely crashed, and we didn't know what was wrong. It seemed like how my mum had experience of glandular fever as a child, and everything kind of pointed to looking like
Okay.
that, but all the tests were coming back clear, and I basically just didn't get better. And after having all the tests under the sun, I was referred to an immunologist, thankfully, and he diagnosed me with ME straight
Gosh.
away.
How long did you have symptoms before that diagnosis?
I was really lucky because for some people it can take like years and years, and I think when I actually got the official diagnosis, I think I'd had them about 10 months. Before that, I'd had a diagnosis of post-viral fatigue syndrome, which can happen after a virus and is kind of like a short-term thing. And so when it went more than 6 months than that, it was like, okay, we need to move into the next category. And that's when I got diagnosed. So I was very lucky because it does take some years.
Just tell us a little bit more about ME for anyone who doesn't. I know roughly sort of what it is and what's involved. But yeah, tell us a little bit more in detail in terms of symptoms and the impact that it has on you.
Yeah, so it's like a really variable disease because there's people in all different severities and everyone experiences them differently. So I can't talk for everybody, but it's a condition that affects every system in your body. It's thought that it's based on a problem with the mitochondria in your cells with how they process energy. So you can't make the energy that a healthy person can make, and that affects all your systems from your immune system from fighting off things to your endocrine system to your like every system you can think of in your body. If it doesn't have enough energy to function, it doesn't function properly. So it causes a range of symptoms like flu-like symptoms, fatigue, which is what it's like mostly known for, but that's just one of many symptoms. Pain, head pain, muscle pain, joint pain, temperature regulation problems, sensory problems. Like I wear dark glasses because too much light affects my symptoms. It
Okay.
makes all my symptoms worse. So if I wear tinted glasses, that cuts out some of the light. So I don't get as much head pain and migraines, but also don't get as much temperature dysregulation, which is kind of crazy to think of that more light could make someone go hot and cold all the time.
Yeah.
Like it's mad, really. And one of the hallmark factors of it is that after any kind of exertion, all the symptoms get worse, even if it's an exertion that had nothing to do with them, like reading a book or something like that. You can get like temporary paralysis, and it's called post exertional malaise. And for some people who are like at the most severe end of the spectrum, they can get post exertional malaise, so a worsening of all their symptoms as like a relapse kind of thing for an unknown amount of time from simply somebody talking in another room, like hearing noise. Yeah. So that's like one of the hallmark symptoms, and it's usually delayed by like 24. For me, it's often delayed like 24, 48 hours. So I can do something and then think, oh, actually, I was okay doing that. And then 2 days later, I'm like, okay, I was not okay doing that.
It'll hit you. And what about POTS? Tell us about that. And were you diagnosed at the same time, or was that more delayed?
Yeah, so the POTS started a couple of months after I started getting ill and not getting better. I just started feeling faint, like multiple times a day. And it's a condition where your blood pools in the lower extremities of your body and it can't pump back up. So it causes you to feel faint and have a really high heart rate as your heart's trying to pump your blood around your body better. And it's just not going to the places it needs to go. And I started feeling faint all the time. And it took think it took about the same amount of time as the ME to get diagnosed because at first it was passed off as teenage girls feel faint, and that's fine. That's
Yeah.
literally what I was told. Teenage girls faint. And
So bad.
yeah, so luckily, eventually, they realised maybe teenage girls shouldn't faint quite so much.
Yeah, there might actually be something here that we need to think about.
Yeah.
So take us back to the farm in terms of what you're sort of doing day to day. So you're doing sort of farm secretary work and then also helping out otherwise.
Yeah. So thankfully, because we have a contracting business and the arable and beef, there's quite a lot of paperwork to do.
I can
So
imagine.
yeah, so when I was growing up, I always wanted to be a farmer. And when people always said, oh, the boys, as in my cousins, can farm, you're clever, you do the paperwork. I was always like, I'm never doing the paperwork. I am never touching it. And because I am farming. And now, ironically, I'm now doing the
Yeah,
paperwork.
the great irony.
Yeah. So yeah, I do all the paperwork, the invoicing, keeping up to date with the farm insurance and MVZs and all the stuff that they're meant to be doing. But when I can, I do stuff with the cattle if we're doing something and if I'm able to go out there at the time. So, and I'm like in charge of organizing things with the cattle, like breeds that we move into, who we AI to, like who's in the replacements and
Yep.
improving them.
Yep. Keeping everyone else in check as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Making sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, it helps with cameras all over the farm, so I can see what they're up to. I can see someone's carving. You need to go now.
Yeah. And I really want to hear more about your wheelchair and sort of accessibility around the farm because I mean, if anyone goes on your Instagram account as well, they'll see this. But I find it amazing actually sort of how accessible it has or it appears to have made your sort of movement around the farm.
Yeah, so for a long time, I wasn't well enough to use a wheelchair outside. Like I was bedbound and in my bedroom for many years. And thankfully, by some miracle, luck, definitely nothing I did. I was one of the lucky ones that got to see some improvement so that I could start going outside. And I started being taken outside on a manual wheelchair. And we started researching what could get me around the farm. And then thankfully, we found one that we adapted with tractor tires, a powered wheelchair. And that's mostly got me around, but it's had some limitations of mud and there's been a lot of getting stuck and needing towing
Okay.
out. So now I found another one that can do even better off road. We seem to have, since I first got my wheelchair in 2019, we seem to have got a lot more options now for more off roading. Um, so yeah, I've got a powered wheelchair now with massive tires that can go literally anywhere. Um, I think I could probably even drive through the cowshed in winter. I'm definitely going to try it. It's
Yeah,
it's
no,
made it
totally.
it's really opened it up. It's made it so I can go check the cows. I can go next to the crush in winter and do all the worming and stuff and weighing. It's got me everywhere basically.
Yeah. One of the things that I sort of when I was reading your blog, and one of the things that you bring up, which I think is really important actually, is this idea of sort of perception of disability, and sort of both how you see yourself, but how others see you as well, and how that works in a farming context. And I'm really interested in your experience of that sort of perception thing, both adjusting yourself in those earlier days as well, but also with other people as well on farm. What was your experience?
I was really lucky that my mum is also disabled, so we already had a lot of things set up to adjust to adapt things so that she could be involved with things. So it was quite easy for me personally to adjust myself and to come to terms with changing things. And like out and about on the farm, with my dad being a farmer, we so used to adapting things, aren't we? And doing a budget job and
Exactly.
doing things. So it was really good to see how many things could be adapted and the perceptions of me from the public. We have a footpath through. I always get a few like shocked looks and people saying, "Oh, are you sure you're okay to be doing that?" I think people think that if someone's out there in a wheelchair, like they must be so fragile and like
Yeah.
they shouldn't be doing anything. That's been the biggest like experience of people's perceptions, like in real life, has been the public walking past and just being so shocked.
Yes. It must be great though to actually sort of show them. It's like, no, it's like I'm just going about my day.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's usually an age group where they're the most shocked, like older age group of people who tend to walk through, and you get like, "Are you sure you're okay doing that? Or are you supervising?" It's like, "No, I'm doing it. It's fine."
How do you think how do you think disability is perceived by the farming industry and in terms of sort of opportunities and accessibility?
I've not had much experience of the actual farming industry other than online because I haven't quite been well enough yet to kind of go and interact in person at events and stuff. But I think from what I've come across, it's actually been really refreshing that a lot of people in the farming industry haven't shied away from me being disabled and they haven't treated me any differently for it. I think we're quite used to injuries, aren't we, in the industry? We've
Sadly.
we've all heard of a lot of injuries. So I think that's kind of the experience a lot of farmers have of disability. I think they are quite good at adapting to things, but I think because you're so isolated on your own farm and you don't come into contact with as many people and definitely not as many disabled people unless someone's been injured, I think we are a bit behind on actually thinking about accessibility. Like there's so many farms I see who have diversification things like holiday lets and stuff, and they're missing like a huge chunk by not putting any accessibility information about that or like the farm shops or something. I think in that way, farming could be a lot more accessible and remember that there are disabled people who want to come and farm and want to come and access the countryside.
I went to go and visit Mike Duxbury's farm. He runs the Inclusive Farm. I don't know whether you've come across that.
Yeah,
And Mike is blind, and I was just it was really interesting to see how he'd adapted his farm to enable him to do everything really. I think that the point you raise about adapting and adaptability, I think it is really key.
yeah, Mike's brilliant. I've seen about Inclusive Farm on, I first saw it on Countryfile and I've seen that they expanded and it's just brilliant. Like the way he set everything up and is like encouraging more disabled people to come and join him.
Yeah. Meet the Farmers is brought to you by RuralPod Media, the only podcast production agency to specialize in the rural sector. We're on a mission to make rural stories mainstream and help businesses, organizations, and communities like you tell your story through podcasting. Podcasting is a fantastic way of connecting with your audience, whoever that might be, getting your message out there and networking with leaders in your niche. RuralPod Media can help you by launching your new podcast or helping you with the technical side. We also provide podcast training and an audit service if you already have a podcast. You're not sure where to take it to next. For more information or to book a call, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk. That's ruralpodmedia.co.uk. Tell us about your blog and how that started.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to like stay connected with farming, even though I couldn't go outside and be on the farm. And I've always wanted, like, it's always been a goal to sell our own meat. That's always been my goal to sell more
Okay.
from the farm and have the cattle bringing more money and therefore kind of support the farm more. And as the years were going by, I was thinking, well, I'm stuck inside. How can I connect to the public to even sell my meat one day? And I started posting on Instagram about our farm and people really enjoyed it. And then I realized that I liked writing lengthy captions that went over the Instagram word limit. So I thought maybe it's time to start a blog and start writing the stories from our farm on there. And also, I found it really helpful to write about disability and chronic illness and like try and give people an insight into my world because there's only so much you can see from a photo. Like there's so many things that you
Yeah.
want to explain or and so many things that come up in daily life that you think more people should know about this. So I started writing thinking that I'd just have a go at writing a few times a month or once a month and see where it went. And people seem to read it. I mean, still haven't got to the meat selling part yet, but I've got a customer base on it. So
It's going to say bit by bit, stage by stage,
yeah.
isn't it? And you'll get there. I wanted to reflect a little bit on. I'm interested in sort of the point that farms are at in because we're sort of mid transition in terms of yeah, sort of moving away from basic payments and moving into sort of the new system policy wise, but also it's been depending on sector, it's been quite an interesting few years in terms of ups and downs, and of course, input costs and feed costs. So yeah, just interested in where you are at as a business at the moment in terms of the transition.
I think the input cost has really hit us. Um, that everything's so much more expensive, isn't it? And everything's so much more expensive to do for customers as well. Like,
Yeah,
so that's hit us and changing over from the old BPS system with, especially for us where some land is rented on like contract farming agreements and stuff. It's still kind of up in the air there whether we can take out some of the SFI options on that land. It's been hard to negotiate whether we take them out, whether the rent needs reducing, whether because at the moment we had the basic payments on that land. So it's been definitely a transition to work out where we go from there. And we've definitely seen with the contracting side, that's like more than 50% of our income. And a lot of customers have put down wildflower mixes and stuff that goes in for 3 years, and we're not going to have to do anything. Like it's going to change how much acreages we have to contract on and
of
how
course.
much drilling and combining we do in future
Yeah.
years.
So I'm assuming that means so the next few years are going to be about really being adaptable and thinking a little bit outside the box.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what people decide to put in and whether they put in stuff that's going to go in for a few years. So we're going to lose some of that baling or combining or whatever. It's interesting to see it all playing out. And I mean, there is a lot of options, and in on our own farm, we're trying to be as environmentally friendly as possible. So I'm enjoying picking out what ones we can implement, what ways we can reduce our fertilizer usage by putting more legumes in the grassland and stuff. Yeah, it's interesting seeing the transition and seeing if people do use the options to go more like nature friendly farming. Um,
Yeah. What's your take on those new options under SFI? So
I think there's some good options, but I think the payment rates are like on some of them leave a lot to be desired, don't they, at the moment? And I think the ones that came out this summer were very helpful and should have maybe come out earlier, like people who signed up and wanted like you cover crop over the summer and how that wasn't available like previously. I think my opinion is they've put them out all at random times, haven't they? And if you were already signed up,
I have
you're
rather.
stuck for a year.
What about the future of the farm in general? Are you so I mean you said that just reflecting on the fact that you have two generations sort of currently on and continuing that transition and you've also mentioned the potential beef boxes or added value in that way. Have you got sort of any ideas of what the future might look like?
Yeah, I'd love the future to look like adding value by beef boxes. I'd also love to get some sheep back here at some point to graze the arable land over winter. I love the idea of using sheep instead of fungicides. I'd love to try and integrate that back in. I just need some more
Okay.
votes for sheep alongside because, as it's been pointed out, I won't be the one checking them. So But yeah, on the future of it with more generations, we seem to the more people who join from the family we seem to just add more contracted into it to make sure that that pays. I think we're going to definitely look at being a bit more resilient on our own farm to try and make sure that's not losing money and that the contracting's not propping that up. We need to be a bit more resilient in the future and look at companion cropping and doing stuff like that to kind of ensure that everything grows. But yeah, I think
Yes.
the future, I'd like to add more value by the beef and do it that way. And I think my cousins will add more value by doing the contracting and expanding that because they can work the long hours.
Let's broaden this out. And I ask most people who come on the show this, but it's sort of in terms of bigger issues generally in farming, and this could be on all sorts of levels depending on how you want to read the question. But what's the biggest issue in farming for you today?
I think the weather cannot be discounted. I think we're going to have to really adapt how we all farm because this is it now. This is climate change. And I think that's one of the issues of figuring out how we adapt to that. And I think for me, I can see for me that I'm so lucky to have been born on a farm and have a family farm to work for. And from looking at friends who aren't from a farming background or who don't have a farm to work on, I think one of the biggest issues is new entrants getting in and like there's no one going to be there to farm in like 20, 30 years time if it doesn't become any easier to actually start farming. I think there needs to be more like contract farm agreements and partnerships like that because I can't see how most new entrants can actually start farming in their own right at the moment.
It's the issue that comes up time and time again, because it's true.
Yeah,
But it is yeah, you have to really, really want it and work at it and find a way at the moment to make it happen, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it has to come with the rewards have to be there as well, and the structure has to be there as well.
yeah, and there has to be some way of helping people who don't have the leg up to get into it. Like I fully see that had I been able to farm how I wanted to, I would have 100% had a leg up by just growing up here.
Yeah,
Even if I didn't want to stay here, it would have still been seen as an advantage to have come from a farm.
yeah.
And I see people who want to be involved who don't have that leg up and have other things going against them and have to deal with racism and homophobia and stuff. And you just think, how are you going to make it if we don't make it any easier?
Just a shout out, listeners, as well. And I do get quite a few people getting in touch, which is really nice. People, so if you're not involved in it from not from a farming background and you're looking for ways in, please do use the Meet the Farmers Network. I just yeah, just get in touch. You can drop me an email to ben@ruralpodmedia.co.uk. And yeah, we've got the great benefit of lots of farmers who know lots of other farmers as well. And it's the great thing about the farming community is that people do like to help. So please do get in touch. Holly, it's been great having you on the show. Before we sort of round up, there are two questions that I ask everyone when they come on the show at the end. I'm going to ask you those now. The first is, if you had a message for the public, any message about anything at all, what would it be?
Oh, I think I'd say thank you because so often it's like thank a farmer kind of thing, but we couldn't do any of this without the public. Like whether they buy lettuce, kale, potatoes, beef, like everything that they're supplying is meaning that we can still work. So I think I'd say thank you. Like no matter what their input is, if they can't afford to buy British for the whole shop, or whether they can afford to go to a farm shop, like they're still helping us stay afloat, aren't they?
Really like that. Flip Banker Farm on its head. Thank the public instead. And your message for farmers.
That's a hard one.
It is.
It is a hard one. Um, I think on farmers, I think from a wider perspective, my message would be work together. We need to work together more. We need to not be as divided. We need to call out when we see racism and homophobia like happening on the farming publications posts on social media. Like, why would anyone want to join us if that's all they see of us? Like, we're not going to encourage more people into the industry like that. And then from my own perspective to farmers, I'd say diversification is so common now, isn't it? And so many have like glamping pods or a holiday cottage or a farm shop or something like that. And just look at your accessibility information, because you're missing like a huge percentage of people who can't visit if they don't know that they're welcome there. So you could be really expanding your customer base and encouraging more people to come and see farming, because how many people from cities join the industry and their story of joining is, when I was a child, I visited a farm for a holiday and
Exactly.
I got the bug. Like, how many children don't get to go and get that bug just because they don't know whether the holiday cottage has a ramp into it and doorways wide enough for a wheelchair, or whether there's large font or braille on a menu in the farm shop.
Good message for everyone to ponder. Holly, thank you so much for coming on the show. Yeah, it's been just great hearing your story and yeah, finding a little bit more about your life on the farm. And
Thanks so
yeah,
much for
just
having me.
oh, it's been great. And yeah, just wishing you and the rest of the family as well the best of luck for the next few years.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure coming on. I hope I haven't rambled too much.
Oh, not at all, not at all. That is it for today. A huge thank you to my guest, Holly Moscrop, for coming on the show. Before you go, Holly, how can people follow you on Instagram or visit your blog?
So they can find me at One Girl and Her Cows on Instagram, and the website is onegirlandhercows.co.uk, where there's the blog and a farm dictionary for people who need a bit of clarification on some of the farming terms we use.
Well, that's a really good idea. Oh gosh, I might even actually use that generally and send people across to that because yeah, we use so much jargon, it's really bad.
Yeah, I keep adding to it as more jargon comes up, and I always forget to tell people it actually exists. So I'm not really sure how people are meant to find it otherwise.
Yeah, so sometimes farmers probably, but even farmers would probably find that useful as well for some things.
Yeah, people from all different like regions have all different words, and it's like, what do you mean by by gimmer? Like,
So yeah, we'll round up for today. Next time we'll be in Essex, and I'll be joined by beef farmer and part-time nurse Chloe Lucas. But for now, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers, and thank you very much for listening.